Everybody, welcome to Smooth Finish. It's been a little bit. We did the conference show and had our conference. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you didn't, you better join us next year. We wanted to follow up on our education series here. This is episode 2, where we're actually hitting one of the topics. And our topic today is surface preparation. You know, what they say in the industry is you're only as good as your substrate. So if you're going over something that's not correct, you'll end up with that issue down the road. The purpose today of our conversation is not to identify or defend any specific method, but talk about the different methods that we recognize as used in the industry. Probably not all of them, but the ones that we're going to discuss. And what we're really looking for is a solid and sound, uniform, clean, porous surface profile. And we're obviously going to talk about what that means throughout the show. We've got some great veterans on with us. We have the first gentleman with us today, Donnie Gammon, who is Yvette Gammon, our president's husband and proprietor of Gammon Pools. Welcome, Donnie. Looking forward to talking to you.
Hi there. How's it going?
Great. We have Mr. David Cooke from Dave Cooke Pool Plastering. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
And we have Ryan Schilli of Schilli Pool Plastering.
Hello.
And what we're going to do today is these gentlemen are going to share the different methods. We're going to talk about the chip out method, which is kind of the old school, the original way, but still happens and it still works. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the use of bond coats for surface prep, and we're going to talk about water jetting, and then of course all the other things that are involved in surface prep beyond just getting the material out, what it takes to get it ready. So do you guys want to talk a little bit before we get into the different methods? Maybe, you know, how you we can start with anybody, just how you prep, how you get ready. There's different ways if you're removing or not. So
Yeah. And Brent, just to jump in here too, really, let's start by talking about what the objective or what the goal is for this conversation, at least to get it started off. Like, what is a best practice, or what is a proven way to get a uniform, clean, porous surface when we're talking about a pool finish? So, if we'll just go from the top of the list, Donnie, you're known as basically the master of the chip out method. When we're talking about these 3 guests today, these are gods amongst men when it comes to surface finishes. So Donnie, if you don't mind starting us off, tell us a little bit about your philosophy, your ideas on chip out method.
Well, it's where we started. When I first started this industry, it was right out of high school, and the first pools we ever chipped were with a sledgehammer. So we were just doing what we could to get that plaster off, because obviously you're never going to stick to a plaster surface, so we got to get it off, get it porous underneath there. And the only way we knew how to do it was to do it with a sledgehammer at that time. Eventually it evolved into jackhammers, and I'd seen other methods and I'd seen them not work, and they probably weren't perfected. This was late 80s. They probably weren't perfected back then. I saw lots of bond coats fail, and I saw a lot of extra work with sandblasting. And so it just kind of was a natural thing for us just to go back to chipping it. It's not the most smooth surface, obviously. They're going to have more problems with under the light at night, seeing the ripples on the floor, but it is fairly uniform in the way it's stripped. It's just sometimes the steps break up a little more, and you just got to use a little extra effort to put that back together. It is definitely the most difficult, and it's kind of like it's a means to an end, because one time you're going to chip this pool one too many times, and it's not going to work out.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Touching on that, how you do have to have some touch and some technique, because essentially, Donnie, you can do some permanent damage if some bad practices are at play when utilizing this method, I assume, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really depends. You can strip a pool the first time and it's not a big deal on a gunite pool. But once you get into that second or third time, that's why it's better to know the history of the pool before you get into it. And so you can, down the road, it's going to be more and more the road. We're going to have to reflash these pools with some gunite or shotcrete or something. It's a little better now because they're using more shotcrete. So when you chip a pool, it doesn't fall apart the way gunite does. So that's going to last longer. But like I said, eventually something's going to have to be different here. Otherwise, we're going to be re-guniting every pool.
Right.
Donnie, now I understand that being in California, by the way, I want to say that we're representing the West Coast, Middle America, and the East Coast with Donnie out on the West Coast, Ryan in the middle, and Dave and I out here on the East Coast. And you're going to find there's three distinct different ways of doing the prep that we all practice. Out west, they're doing full chips, and that's a regular thing. And that some of the methods we're going to talk about, a lot of people, they do commonly all across the country, but specifically on the chipping part, does the fact that you are out in California and the amount of earthquakes that you have, I understand that has one of the reasons why you guys do a full chip outside of just wanting to have a pocky surface for the plaster to finish to meet to. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I haven't really, that hasn't been in correlation with what we're doing. The earthquakes don't really come into play in this at all.
Okay. So I was missing.
Yeah, I've lived here my whole life, and earthquakes aren't as common as you think they are, but they really haven't come into play as far as that goes.
Okay.
I'm me being a Kansas City boy, I'm looking at Ryan. Are there any techniques that we need to take care of for tornadoes?
No, just hide, run.
Yeah.
No, that's hilarious. That's funny. On that, Donnie, have you seen any structure personally? I'm sure you have, but what type, if any, have you seen any type of structural damage or movement in a pool structure from an earthquake? Now I'm just kind of curious.
I've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 times, and it wasn't major. It was more like where the decks were meeting the coping
Sure.
type areas. It wasn't like down deep into the pool. So I haven't seen anything really major. And then when I saw that, it was like over 20 years ago. So.
Wow. Well, that says something about the structural integrity of a swimming pool. It sounds more secure than a building in a lot of instances. Hey, next up, let's introduce Dave Cooke too, with Dave Cooke Pool Plastering, who has a PhD in bond coating. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about bond coating before we kind of get to Ryan and drill into the nitty gritty of this conversation?
Okay, so on a remodel, if you're going to say not tile the pool, it's just going to be a straight up replaster, a pebble, whatever it's going to be. Basically, you go in and you undercut the tile, you cut down 4 or 5 inches below that. You chip that all out to get all the plaster out so that you can form up to the bottom of the tile again, nice and smooth. And on that bottom cut, you have to chip that down so it's not a straight line, because you will see it. Then basically you go through the pool and you find if there's any hollow spots in the pool. And typically in this part of the world, well, it could be anything. It could be a ton or it could be hardly any. And if it's a lot, if you ever watched taken Robbie's class, you'll see if it looks like the moon surface, you just got to keep chipping. Because we do a fair amount of chipping too, because it's necessary. And but say on an average one, you get 2 or 3 spots, 2-3 feet in circle. Now the trick on that is if you're doing hollow areas and when you're chipping them, if the outside edge of those hollow spots are horizontal, you haven't hit solid yet. You got to keep chipping until you get like a 45-degree angle biting back, because now the plaster isn't coming off. So if you're straight up and down, you got a basketball there and the existing plaster straight up and down, you have to keep going. You have to go to solid. So that's on hollow spots, and then you fill those in. But then, you give it a light acid wash. neutralize it, and we pressure wash it with a 4,000 PSI pressure washer. If in fact it's a little flaky, we'll use a 0 tip on that pressure washer to get anything that's, make sure it's down to solid. Then when you mix your bond coat, now what we do is we spray it on. So we got a little 8 cubic, whatever it is, foot air compressor and a hopper gun. And in that, you mix it up like pancake batter, because when you put bond coat on, it has to be a darker brown. It can't be light. If it's light, you've basically created a bond breaker, because you've just basically taken the strength right up. It's like mixing plaster like soup. Okay, it's not a good idea. You have to have some body to it. So now you got a nice deep brown bond coat. I don't know what tip, I meant to ask my guys what tip they use on the hopper gun, but so basically when that's ready to be bond coated, we start spraying. And the technique on spraying bond coat on a pool is you go vertical and you spray about 50% of the surface. And then you go back and you spray horizontal the other 50%. So you're tying it in like a weave. And when you spray it on, it basically has a real rough surface, so that it's going to bond. And it's probably rougher than some of the original gunite pools that we, plaster. So, the technique is make sure you get your hollow spots, clean it really well. Light acid wash. You don't want to go straight acid. You don't want to burn it. You don't want to make it sandy, because nothing's going to stick to sand. So you're basically just getting the dirt and maybe some minerals off it and stuff like that. And then like we do, we neutralize it, then we give it a good pressure wash. And like I said, if it's kind of flaky stuff, we run into that very rarely, but then we'll just 0 tip the whole thing. Takes a while, but everything's off that's going to come off. And then, like I say, you go horizontal, vertical, 50-50, and you got a hell of a surface to replaster that pool. And we've had very little issues with bond coat, but of course we've had the same guys doing it from 15 to 30 years.
Yeah. Which
So
obviously
we have
helps.
well, yeah, it helps. But, we have very few issues with bond coat that we do. We'll put it that way.
Hey,
Right.
Dave,
But,
quick-
and I'll just going to jump in on that. And it's the failures that I have seen with bond coat. We don't do just our own pools. We do a lot of subcontract work as well. It's almost always, I shouldn't say almost, it's always the bond coat peeling off the pool wall. So we come back to proper prep. It's washing the pool down properly. It's getting everything off of there. If you're acid washing a pool, and you leave a little bit of that residue on there and then bond coat over that bond coat's not going to stick. So you really want to make sure you have a clean surface to bond coat to. And then that bond coat, if you clean that wall properly, those walls on the floor properly, that bond coat's not going anywhere, and it will last the test of that time anyway. You could tell when it goes bad, it all goes bad. It starts popping up.
Right.
It's a lot of fun.
We bond coat also. We bond coat, and same thing. I mean, it lasts as long as you're doing it right, prepping everything right.
Well,
Yeah, it's
we
interesting.
want
Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. No, I'd say, we'd like to water blast everything too, but, we just have too much to do in a short time frame. There's no way we can run it around, and dance on that. So, basic residential, pools that, we're doing, we do a decent amount of bond coat. We bond coat 100 pools a year with no issues.
Yeah.
So, but we plaster a lot of pools with bond coat. Again, that, like Robbie said, we do have issues. And as we're trying to educate along the way here, some people are listening. So, I mean, it's like anything. If you got a good foundation, your house is going to be there. If you don't have a good foundation, good luck with that. And it's like anything else. You got a good shell on a pool, that pool's going to last a long time.
Whenever we
Um,
water blast with our 20, we got a 40 and a 20. And whenever we water blast with our 20, we still bond coat after that. But I'm water blasting 2 to 3 pools a day. My 40 I can do 2 pools a day with my 40. So So
Now, when you're, are we segueing into more water blasting now?
Yeah, Ryan, if you would kind of just, from a 30,000 foot level here, could you kind of just share your philosophy and general practice when it comes to water jetting as
what
we
we
as we
do-
discuss preparation?
Basically what the other guys do, we send out a crew the day before to drain and prep the pools with undercut and everything, just like Dave said that they were doing. And then I send a blast crew in the next day, and they can knock 2 out in a day blasting, and we're blasting all the way down to the concrete with the 40 and with the 20,000. We're only able to profile it. So that's when we go in and put a bond coat over the top of that just to give it the texture. But the 40,000, that profile's just as rough, if not rougher than.
Why wouldn't you use the 40 every day?
I'm blasting 3 pools a day.
Okay.
So
But you're going back and bond coating.
yeah,
Some of them.
with the 20,000 PSI one, we're going back and bond coating. But the 40, we don't have to, because it's like a chip out. It gets it so rough that you don't need to do anything with it. And then I'll have a cleanup crew. I got a vac truck. We'll have a vacuum crew go in there and clean and acid wash the pool the next day, and then we're plastering over the top of that.
Typically, how many layers of plaster is on a pool that you're able to get down to the gunite?
It depends. Three is probably the max, but it takes them a couple extra hours to blast. But when there's 1 or 2, we're in and out of those blasts in 3-4 hours. But like I said, it also helps having a prep crew go in there the day before and get everything prepped to where you need it. So all they do is set up their blaster and go.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, when we have using 20,000, it's a little bit of extra time for us with having to bond coat, clean and bond coat, acid wash, and then bond coat, obviously. But the 40,000 is a cat's meow. We've been using a 20,000. We started with a 20,000 probably about 5 years ago. And I guess it was 2 years ago we switched over to the 40, and there was issues to begin with, and we had to figure out what we needed, and we bought a vac truck to help with the mess, but we added an extra guy, 2 guys to our payroll, because you have to buy a vac truck, you got to clean it out, and so forth and so on. When we were using a 20, I had my blasters were able to go in, drain the pool, blast the pool, clean and acid wash the pool, but less mess. Now we're using a 40 more profile. Ever since we start using a 40, we haven't had any callbacks, anything, because of the profile it leaves on the surface.
So the 40 is your preferred method now that you've got a good handle. What was the learning curve like? I mean, you said this is relatively new in the history of Schilli pool, Schilli surfaces here, but was it a rough 2-year learning curve, or was it? It
was a dogfight between my dad and I can tell you that.
I sensed a good story here. That's why I dug in.
No, I didn't want to do anything with it. He kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I said, it's more labor, but now I'm doing 2 a day. I'm able to do 2 to 3 pools a day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big thing. And I mean, yeah, fortunately he was right. Experience is always right.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
For
Indeed.
sure. And not,
You know what
not
I'm
afraid to change some norms,
Yeah.
Get out of the comfort zone every once and again.
Yeah. He's joining us right now. He's coming in, and we're just talking about
old Captain 40.
we're just talking about the difference between the 40 and the 20.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Well,
I listened to him, and like I said, we're blasting 2 a day.
You missed it, Dave. Ryan just admitted that you were right.
Oh, that's amazing.
Conveniently when you were out of the room.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, guys, we've mentioned preparation in a couple of different instances. Are there any, do you guys want to discuss kind of briefly what we do to best prepare as a step one for these? I know, Ryan, you talked about your prep crew. You send them in strategically a day early. Is there a big difference in how we do with these different approaches of how we prepare the pools?
I think it's all the same. I mean, you talk to Donnie and Dave, we all have the same methods of prep.
Yeah.
I think Donnie probably has 5 guys in a pool doing chip outs, where I have 2 guys prepping and then 2 guys coming in the next day to blast. So, I mean, it's the same labor, different ways of doing things.
Right.
Donnie, are you chipping out every pool that you come across?
Well, we only do bond coats over pebble. So I don't do bond coats over plaster. But other than that, yes, we're chipping out all of them.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's just like I said, it's what I grew up with. And it's kind of like, I feel like the water jetting, you're going to spend about $300,000 on something and still have the same amount of work. I don't know. I've been talking to a lot of people about the water jetting, and like some people only use it on the big commercial pools and they still chip out the little pools. Are you doing that at all, Ryan? Are you chipping at all on the little pools because of the mess factor? Or I just heard it's kind of a difficult to, it's just a lot of mess for a small backyard pool is what I've been told.
Yeah. Hey, Ryan, Ryan, are you doing the water jet on all your pools? I don't know if you heard Donnie's question, but are you doing it on all size pools or favoring larger vessels?
Everything that we're remodeling, we will water jet. If we do a spot, we use the 20 or chip it out just because it's so small. But yeah, I mean, the spots we bond coat after we chip them out, obviously.
Yeah, Chris, what you were getting at, I think, is, a lot of this conversation is talking about prep before surface prep, right? There's a whole step of preparation. And I guess I'd equate it to like a painter, right? He's going to trim out the room before he does the bulk of the work.
Right.
You're going to do your sanding, you're going to do your priming, you're going to do all that stuff. And ours, it's kind of the reverse,
Brian
right?
Back. See what you want.
And the reverse of that is, we're cutting back. If they're bond coating, I know they're, Dave mentioned it, you're cutting back below the tile before you do anything more. And you're finding, I don't know, Dave, you didn't say isolate. But we used to preach, and you did in a way, but isolating the hollow where you would actually like take a cutter and cut around diagonally. So you keep that, otherwise you're banging on it. You're going to chase that hollow all day long. You're going to make it loose. But I didn't hear anybody mention degreasing, and I know that people do it. TSP. I see smiles. People won't see smiles on a phone.
You find that a lot. Like your painting pools. That's where TSP really comes into effect. And we're not painters, but painting the pool, because the grease loves to hang on paint. Maybe down in Florida, because the pools are open year round, you have a little bit more of that. I think. No, but you're not wrong. If you have a greasy surface, you have suntan lotions and whatever on that surface, nothing's going to stick to it. It's going to come off of there.
Yeah, well, down here in Florida, what we found a lot, especially commercials, they drain the pool, and people are lathering up with all their crap, and then you drain the pool, and it leaves a nice even coating all the way down as it drains. So you go and acid wash that, you'll lock that stuff right in.
Yeah.
So without a degreaser first, but we always would preach that, degrease first and then do your acid wash, and always neutralize. That's the other thing. So many guys acid wash and they might rinse, but neutralize is important, especially if you're going pretty quick,
A little bit.
You still got, acid on the wall and you're going to plaster over it. That's not good for anything. So,
and that goes with the power washing and making sure you have that residue off the wall, you know, that those all connected. I was gonna say that we all are talking about the same thing. But I do find it cool how everybody is a little bit different. I mean, I know we do a combination of water blasting and bond coats. You know, we water blast a lot of commercial pools, and we're probably a little newer to it than Ryan is. So that said, we do find a huge benefit with the pools that we are water blasting. We like the profile that it's leaving behind. We like that it's as, in my opinion, it's as good or as strong as an actual gunite finish when you're applying up against it. You end up using a little bit more material because you're really digging deep. You're digging into the surface, but you end up with a really strong bond. You know, so we're working on building, making our water blasting more part of our everyday practice. It's just, you know, gaining that traction. We're going back to learning curves like Ryan and Dave probably went through years back when. But we find great success with the pools that we are doing with it. Rarely are we actually putting a bond coat or a water blasted surface because the profile is so well beat up in the right way. Now, Ryan, I have a question for you. Do you find that when you water blasting those pools, and I think there's a notion out there that if you stick on one spot or stay on one spot too long, that you could actually tear away part of the gunite profile, get in too much take too much of the gunite out.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, we our guys sweep the surface until it's down to the gunite. You know, they won't go past. Once they hit shell or see shell, they're done. They move. But they just sweep back and forth until they get a nice good profile down where they see shell.
So, but you're not finding any like because everyone has a selling point against certain things because they don't have it. They're not out there with the water blaster and what is this new technology. So it's not something that you can't miss and blow a hole through the gunite. You really have to work at it.
Not unless you have dead concrete. I mean, we
right.
We were working on a big country club about a month ago, and whole corner of a wall fell off because it was all dead concrete.
Wow.
I mean, we had to go back in and rebuild it.
And that's something you would do regardless. If you had, you would think you would try to do anyway. If you had rebound dead concrete in a wall, a step. I mean, it's you're in there prepping the pool. You would want to take that out, remove it, and get back down to solid concrete and rebuild as best you can, to where you can put a new surface over it without any issues down the road.
Yep.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue too, because one of the things that we wanted to discuss for the listeners out there is basically if there is any type of structural issue that's discovered during this process, like how you've dealt with them. And I guess that's a great way to start. Are there other instances, Donnie, Dave, of situations where you have discovered some sort of a structural issue that has occurred doing as you go through this process?
Yes, definitely. Unless you want to go first, Dave. We've been chipping on floors in big commercials and just found dirt, and so we've had to retie the whole floors and pour concrete. That's happened a few times, and this is what's going to happen when pools keep getting stripped over and over, and nobody's taking care of that. So, yes, definitely seen stuff like that. Yeah, I haven't had any walls fall down, but I have seen floors not.
But you better knock on some wood,
there.
Donnie.
Those earthquakes. That's where the earthquake comes.
We rebuild a lot of steps because a lot of pools are gunnited, and where does the rebound go? It goes to the steps, and they patty cake them.
Yeah, we build a lot of steps.
And then we have a lot of spas, jacuzzis, whatever you want to call them, And a lot of those walls, when we get back to them 15, 20 years later, go to remodel these, a lot of those walls are pretty beat up, and we're rebuilding, you know, the top third, the top half, sometimes the whole darn thing. And, you know, sun shelves and some benches, but basically steps, we rebuild a lot of steps. So that's just our area, you know, and wintertime up here is, you know, it beats stuff up. You know, that's why you have to do things right, because the great equalizer is Mother Nature in the wintertime. And if you don't do it right, it's going to come back and tell you did it wrong real fast. So that's how our remodel business is booming all the time. So
we
capitalizing off of old man winter.
we had
Job security.
We had a pool that we recently looked at. I had to go look at it, and there's cracks all over the entire pool. I mean, they were gaping cracks, and we were getting blamed that it was the plaster that was delaminating, and so I told them we'll get in there and blast it, and we actually took it all the way down to the shell and found out that there was a lot of cracks in the structure, and we're still dealing with it today as we speak. So
are you in our backyard? Are you doing our job too? Because we're going through the exact same thing right now. We took the top off of a sun shelf. Customer calls us last year and says, you know, your product cracked over the shell here, and I go out. It's not our product that cracked it. Well, it did crack. The shell cracked, and it's on the sun shelf, steps, what have you, and the pool's losing, you know, inches of water. And we go and this year we tear off the top of take the material off the sun shelf, and actually I back up. We did some patchwork on the cracks, and you could put your finger into these cracks and scrape out the sand that was in the crack. It was just the cracks were just opening up, and it was just really poor cement. Talk to the builder, talk to the homeowner. Builder deny, not my problem. It's, you know, all pools do this. Every excuse in the book. Fast forward to this year, we take the top off of the thing, off of the sun shelf. We're going to try to fix everything up, and our guys are just digging deep, inches deep into this sun shelf, and it's sand. It's you could see where real concrete is and where the rebound or the sandy cement is, and it's in large areas. And we basically said to the owner, it's a property owner, said, you got to get back, you got to get the pool company back in here to rebuild this, and when you're done, we'll come back, because it's you know, it's an absolute nightmare. It's when you're shooting these pools, and now we're into new pools, you know, you're only as good as what your gunite guy is capable of doing, and that can come back and haunt us like it's doing now, 5 years down the road. This pool's only 5 years old.
Well, I think that's the point of this. I mean, we're, you know, our organization, for the most part, our members, you know, the guys here, we're plasterers, right? So we're the guys putting on, and we're the last foot in the pool, as you guys know. So that's kind of the whole point of this conversation. Structural has to be addressed. There's a ton of structural in Florida because we build in sand. I mean, stuff moves. So, you know, stapling, those types of things, there's a couple of tools made here just in Florida because of the amount of movement and stuff that happens. So, you know, plaster is not going to fix that. If it's separating, you plaster over it, not chances are it's going to separate again, and you're going to have a nice crack through your pool. So that was definitely what we wanted to get across in this part of it, is address that structural stuff, whether it's you or the builder that originally did it. Yeah, make sure you communicate that and fix it, because plaster is certainly not going to fix structural.
You know, how do you guys address new pool? I mean, do you want to talk about new pools too? I mean, I know we're talking a lot about remodels, but in the sense of, you know, what are you looking for from your builders on your surface? You know, and when you come, what do you do when you come across like a flash that's failing, for example?
I've had to leave a few pools because the shock or the gunite guys, just things were so sandy. Like you said, you could take a hammer into that shelf and go forever, go inches and inches down. So those ones we've had to walk away from, because, you know, obviously we can't put something on that, it's never going to stick. So yeah, we had to walk away from some. So luckily everybody here is using shotcrete now, and it, you know, it works a heck of a lot better than gunite ever did.
So you find that between shotcrete wet and shotcrete dry, you've seen a switch to shotcrete wet, and you're finding more success, better success with that.
Well, shotcrete wet and dry, I'm not sure what you mean there. If you
Well,
dry
the
mix,
old
gunite
you're
is
from the
dry
80s,
mix, right?
so the new
That's-
terminology is shotcrete, right? So shotcrete wet is what I think what you're referring to is shotcrete. Shotcrete dry is gunite.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, right, I see what you mean, mixing it at the nozzle, but that's sand and cement and somebody shoveling it as opposed to it coming out of a truck where it's, you know, rock and cement. So
yeah,
certainly I would prefer shotcrete.
Well, that's definitely better pool, but if they know what they're doing. Unfortunately for us in our world, the shotcrete is the wet mix, you know, shooting concrete kind of went out after 08 in that depression that we're in, and now it's all gunite. And granted,
Oh wow,
they're pretty good guniters, you know, that we have, as I say, on the mainland. And there's some good ones in Long Island, but, you know, as case point that Robbie put through, you know, we don't know who this builder is, but he didn't shoot a good pool. And of course, he's not backing it up because he's blaming it on the winter. So this homeowner's out in left field, and we get involved, of course, and we're trying to do the right thing. But, you know, we didn't shoot the pool, and, you know, the sun shelf's not good. Is the whole pool not good? And, you know, out there, you pay a lot of money. So, I mean, the companies we deal with, you know, they're doing a good job, but we don't really have any shotcreters left that I know of.
So now, with the conversation of good shotcrete, good concrete versus bad, you know, a lot of pools end up having what we call weepers, where the water's coming in from behind the pool and become an absolute nuisance. I mean, it's one thing to have groundwater. You have a point of control where you can pull it out of, you know, usually through the main drain and the hydrostat, or a well point outside of the pool. Weepers are kind of those things that just, you know, if you have, especially in the spring, you got a wet ground around it, it's so hard to stop. What are yours, Ryan? What's your best practice in stopping a weeper or slowing it or controlling it?
Call us when it's sunny out. No, we each of the trucks carries hot cement on their truck, and our hot patch is what we call it. And a lot of times we can stop them. There's a couple times we've drilled through the actual shell itself and put a straw in there and put a bucket on there just so we can get the pool plastered. And patch it back up right before we leave the job, and you can never see it. I mean, there's a couple times we left job sites because they were coming in like waterfalls, and we see that more often when they don't have decks put on and they're hounding us to plaster the pool, and then we tell them get a deck put on this thing and we'll come back.
Design on a new pool, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I ask that because here, their pools with just grass right up to the edge is common.
Yeah,
it's not the norm, but it's common because it's a look. You know,
I had a pool builder call me this morning and asked, "Can you guys plaster a pool? There's no deck on it. They want to put grass all the way up to the coping." And I said, "Well, we've had rain here every week for the last 3 weeks. So let's see if we get some dry weather, a dry spell over the next 2, and we'll get in there and plaster it."
You know, in my opinion, a solid shell shouldn't weep.
Well, sometimes on the new pools, it follows the return lines. It'll follow the light. So it'll always be leaking under light or under a line. So it's just chasing that pipe down.
Ours is in the walls, and I have one builder that gets fluorescents in the walls, and he'll go in there and grind them out and waterproof them.
Yeah, we have a lot of weepers in Florida, boys, because we're water level. So
Yeah.
it's natural. I mean, cement and sand. Listen, man, water's going to find a way. It doesn't take much. So
Absolutely.
they address it for sure.
So,
Well,
Brent, do you know how they address it? I mean, because
Oh, yeah, usually,
often, and you know, I'm in line with what Ryan was saying. You know, I also know there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think I learned something with him saying about putting a straw in there and letting it weep out through that. I mean, that's got to be one hell of a weep that you got to put. You got to put give it a tracheotomy on that one. You know.
yeah, I mean, they have a ground pump, right? You're going to get a ground pump to make sure you're removing as much as possible. But generally, like he said, a hot patch, you know, a hydraulic cement that you can get on there. You might chase it a little. A lot of times that'll reverse the pressure enough to allow you to plaster the pool.
Yeah, we used to,
And again, that's right. That's right at Plaster. So
We use
yeah,
diaphragm.
we would take white cement and mix it with as much calcium as you could, and you know, make it lava hot and put it on there, and it would seal it up. So
See, we used to do that,
and then we started using hydro plugs or water stop after that.
right, same type thing. Yeah.
Right.
we there's sometimes we'll leave the main drain plugs out and stick our hose down there
Yep.
because we use the diaphragm pumps and just stick a hose down there and let it run all day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had one in Coronado recently that we had to shoot it at low tide, and then we still had to pump water out of the ground just to get it done. So, yeah, that stuff happens.
But you know, it's the same thing like Ryan was saying. When you have gunite's still porous, and you know, you get 2 or 3 days of heavy rain. You know, it's like sticking a sponge in a bucket and lifting it up, and that water is coming out of the bottom of the sponge, and that's going to happen around your steps and benches and stuff, and it's just going to be a waterfall for a couple of days. So, you know, and again, know your builder, you know what you're walking into, and we know that if it's going to rain, you know, heavy for 2 days, we're rearranging the schedule because there's no sense in going there. It's just going to be, you know, steady water. And, you know, the old adage, add material to water, not water to material, or whatever the thing is there. You don't want to, there's no way you're chasing it. I mean, there's going to be 100 gallons flowing out of that shell that day. So.
I have a builder.
That leads me. Go ahead.
I have a builder
Go ahead,
here
Ryan.
in St. Louis that waterproofs everything. Every shell he builds, he puts waterproof on it. So
Don't tell Bill Drakely that.
Yeah. That's for another topic. I'm not touching that one.
Thank you for serving up an easy topic for us.
Yeah.
there you go.
So one thing I want, kind of where we're temping on it, and we'll let everybody get going here, but one thing is something I want to address. You know, when you're done prepping versus when you're going to plaster, and you'll get different things from different, if it's bond coat manufacturers or whatever. But my theory has always been it depends on the environment. If you've prepped that pool and then it rains for 3 days straight and dries out and rains, dries out, and efflorescence or those types of things, my opinion is you have to kind of approach it again and make sure you're prepped and ready. There's no bond breakers from efflorescence. There's no sand or dirt and shit from trees, you know. Ooh, I used the first curse word on our podcast. Sorry, guys.
Others do worse. We're good.
Yeah, that was pretty good. But anyway, so it's very important that that's considered too, in surface prep. Make sure that you're considering your other factors. If it sits around for, you know, some guys will prep and it sits all winter. You know, you got to do something with it before you go and plaster it. So that was something we definitely wanted to make sure we mentioned.
Well, I actually did this because we're just starting up and we're a couple of weeks going now. And I had exactly that scenario happen with, I went to go visit a job site where they bond coated a week, 9 days prior. And enough time that it dried, but then you had the effervescence, efflorescence appear on it. Told them to hose it down or power wash that off, get it nice and clean. And interestingly, when he did that, the entire thing scaled up. I called the bond coat manufacturers. You know, what do we do here? And he says, well, sometimes when they get wet like that, that will happen. You just go back and give it a very mild acid wash and power wash, but you don't want to power wash it off. Otherwise you're redoing the whole thing again. But, you know, you do want to be careful about that because plaster will stick to that effervescence. It won't stick to the bond coat. You know, and we're talking about bond breakers here, and that's a perfect candidate. You know, when you're just clean and solid is key. And I had another one that you know she bond coated it last year. Was sending me pictures today. What do? I told her, well, you want a surefire bet? You got to take it off and put it back on. Set through the whole winter. Who knows what happened? So that was my advice to her. Incidentally, she's looking for some other answer because who wants to rebond coat the pool? But that's the best answer I could give you. If you want a sure thing, take it off and redo it.
And on bond coat, anytime you bond coat, and like you said, if weather gets bad or something, you have to send a crew back, double check it. But you know, our guys have blowers on the truck because they all do pebble, so we have the blowers to, you know, move the water along when you're doing pebble. So they'll go into a pool and they'll blow it down. But on a pool that's bond coated, you always have to rinse it because you don't want any dust on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know, in our world, pollen, anything, because it won't stick. You know, cement doesn't stick to dust. So you have to make sure you rinse it down and it's clean. So don't just blow it down or, you know, sweep it or, you know, wave a towel at it or whatever you want to do. You got to rinse it down, get the dust off it, make sure it's clean, you know, because we do the same thing. I mean, it's cool up here. So well, I think we're going to start bond coating some pools next week. And, you know, when it's colder out and you're bond coating, I missed that one. You know, you got to give it a couple of days to dry to be on the safe side. I mean, middle of July, it's 95 degrees out. Those guys have done it noontime. You're there the next day plastering it. But, you know, where it's going to be cool at night or whatever. So we're going to prep a pool on Monday, you know, and bond coat it, say, if we're lucky enough to do it in one day or bond coat it on Tuesday. You know, we're not even thinking of going there till Thursday or Friday. You know, give it time to do its thing. You know, you don't want to get there and Robbie knows, you know, guys are rushing through, everything's ready, you know, and they're bond coating that thing at 5 o'clock at night and we're there at 7 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't work out well, you know, because now we're leaving because it's not dry enough.
Yep.
So when it's cooler out, we have to give it more time. We program that in the scheduling to give it at least, you know, 48 hours, preferably, you know, at least. Usually it's in the 50s, you know, about 50 something hours before we go back. So that's just one thing. You have to let it dry and you have to rinse it down. Even if it's a couple days old, just rinse it down.
All right, perfect. What do you guys think? Got a smooth
Is there
finish
any-
coming on here?
Yeah. Is there anything, Ryan or Donnie, that you want to leave with the audience as we work our way towards the smooth finish?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was waiting for you to
No,
say
hey.
something.
Well, if you
I just
want a
wanted to say-
smooth finish, get your preps right. Get them down pat. Listen to the advice of these old guys, except for Ryan. He's a puppy. He just turned 40 2 weeks ago. You know, you're only as good as your prep. Just remember that you're only as good as your prep. And we plasters, we do the best we can to help your job, make your jobs easier. And our goal is just to have the best surface possible to apply our products to, and have a happy customer at the end of the day. So pay attention to what you're doing. If you have questions, of course, you can reach out to anybody at the NPC here, any one of us, and we're happy to help out. I personally want to thank everybody for coming here. You know, this was a little bit of a joyful thing for myself. And by the way, my name's Rob Romano. My co-host is Chris Marcano. Brent was the guy that started the podcast. He forgot to introduce us, so I just want to be clear on who's talking here. And you know, I'll end things with that and pass it back to Brent. So thanks, everyone.
Well, thanks for passing it back. But look, our listeners are repeat, Robbie. They all know us already. I don't have to introduce them. We're famous, baby. We're famous. And now we're more famous because these guys joined us.
Yep.
Anyway, guys, thanks so
Awesome.
much for your time today. And yeah, there's more we could talk about, but I think we really identified what we wanted to, which, let's just say that sentence: a solid, sound, uniform, clean, porous surface profile. And then
All right.
we can have a smooth finish.
Smooth finish.
All right, boys.
Come on, everybody.
Have a good
Smooth
one.
guys.
finish.
Thank you.
All right. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye,